of you again would be to turn your cameras on. You cannot do a digital humanities class if we are not digitally active and digitally present in the classroom. If all of you can kindly turn the cameras on. Everybody. It doesn't matter how you are looking, and it doesn't matter who will judge you. Just be on the camera so that I can see you and your eyes. So today's class would be titled The History of Digital Humanities. Dr. Neog has kindly already shared with me some YouTube videos of the last lectures that you had, as and when you had the previous talks about digital humanities in the past. I was actually patiently going through the wonderful lecture that was delivered by Dr. Arjun Ghosh. And of course, I understand that Dr. Arjun Ghosh has already covered a large part of understanding digital humanities in literature. So what I will do is, I also had a plan to talk about NPTEL and about Swayam. But because Dr. Arjun Ghosh has already spoken about NPTEL, Swayam, and other digital libraries which are sponsored by the government of India, I will try and see if I can talk less about that and if I can talk about other historical details as and when we are doing digital humanities. Is that okay? All of you remember Dr. Ghosh's lecture, I am sure. So I will not go into the part which has already been covered by him. I, on the contrary, will start talking to you about a certain date, 1949. The date 1949, I will also write it down in the chat. So if anybody wants to take notes or want to take it down for your personal readings, you can have it from here. Can anybody understand why the date 1949 is so important in the studying of digital humanities across the world, not just India? Anybody did up any basic reading? Anybody has any idea? The importance of 1949 in doing digital humanities. Please, let's make the class interactive because this is not a seminar lecture. Please talk. You know or you do not know? Any idea? Okay, no answer. Okay, so I think nobody understands why.
I request my students kindly respond. I request our students kindly respond our madam's questions or everything. Okay?
And don't be scared of me. I am just born a few years before all of you, which is why I am a madam. In the next few years, many of you will become sirs and madams yourselves. So it's nothing. It's nothing. Just give me responses and let's make the class interactive. The year 1949 is an absolutely important year in the history of digital humanities, if digital humanities is a subject. Now, one has to and foremost, like I was telling you yesterday, digital humanities it's more a methodology, but since it is still an academic discipline, it is important for us to trace it from however beginning we can. Remember yesterday, we were already talking about a sort of timeline algorithm in which we wanted to figure out how to figure out which is before and which is after, how to trace timelines, to which some of the students actually correctly answered that one of the good ways of doing it is by looking at dates through which you appear, through which a certain thing appears. Accordingly, today, if we have to trace a history of digital humanities across the world, we can do it in many ways. One of the easiest ways of doing it, of course, would be trying to look at the phrase digital humanities as it exists in history. But then there is a problem, because sometimes you know what happens, certain tendencies start appearing before a formalized discipline has taken shape. For instance, many of you might already have heard of this academic discipline called translation studies. Yes or no? Have you heard of this discipline called translation studies, which talks about the idea of translation, correct. So most of you have heard about translation studies. If I were to tell you, give me a history of translation studies, would you start talking to me about when the first academic discipline of translation studies was established? Or would you trace it even before that and try and tell me that translation activities began back from that age, but translation studies as a discipline started only then? What will you say, the first answer or the second answer?
Second one, ma'am.
Correct. That is because we often try to look at history not from specific formalized, institutionalized dates, but also from tendencies which started showing ample similarities with what later would be known as translation studies, digital humanities, whatever. So when we study literature and say we study a very critical topic such as feminism, one way of looking at it is from the first wave of feminism. We could try and locate around 1910, Virginia Woolf around that time and say, this is from where feminism starts. But that is not what we do. We start all the way back from Mary Wollstonecraft. Some of us, even when we're doing literatures from India, some of us even try and look at feminism back from the times of Upanishads, where it was actually mentioned that, I forget the Sanskrit shloka, but it says something like, if you are not taking me as a woman person, then what is the whole point about being a woman partner? Because more than being a partner, I am a human being of my own. So there are many instances where if one were to look at feminism, one would start all the way back from the Upanishads. Does that mean feminism existed during the time of Upanishads? No. Why are we still tracing history from the time of Upanishads? Because more than an institutionalized, formalized date, we are trying to look at tendencies from where it all began. Accordingly, 1949, please understand, is not a date from which digital humanities started. In fact, the phrase digital humanities did not even exist in 1947. Talk about Indian context, 1949 is about 2 years after our independence. 1949 is not even a time when Indians were bothered about digital humanities. 1949 is not a time when many countries were even independent and free. Many countries gained freedom and independence after 1949. If you're talking about freedom and independence in India, we are only 2 years old in 1949. We are clearly not thinking of a discipline called digital humanities in 1949. But if one were to look back at tendencies, at processes, and at activities which existed back even in 1949, where people used digital tools or computational graphics or any other means and methods in order to do some traditional form of humanities, it is then that we have to look back to 1949. Which brings us to one important debate, because the next class, which is tomorrow, would be on the most important debates in digital humanities. And the first debate would be, wait, let me write it down. The first debate which we will try and talk from tomorrow, for tomorrow's class, is this: tendencies or institutionalized disciplines. Which one are we trying to hold in order to study digital humanities, or in order to study any emerging discipline for that matter? Let us have a quick round of debate here. We will not answer the debate. What would you say? What would you try and understand as one of the more important things in order to study any new emerging academic discipline? Would you look at tendencies for looking at history, or would you look at institutionalized disciplines in itself in order to look at history? Which one do you want to look at and why? Sorry, there is some sound at the back. That's my dog crying. Okay, excuse me for that. If you were to take up this debate, just give me quick. You don't have to give me elaborate responses. We'll do it elaborately tomorrow. For today's class, in order to trace the history of any academic discipline, would you look at tendencies or would you look at institutionalized moments in the discipline?
Both.
Both is actually a very clever diplomatic answer. You have a good chance of working in the diplomacy. But yes, one would actually try and say tendencies. They're created way before. Just give me a second. There's an examination going on, a whole lot of problems. Just give me a second.
Is D-U D-I-O D-I-O
Sorry, there's this other examination going on and we're doing it through Microsoft Teams, internet problems. Some people cannot submit answers timely. So the correct answer, according to my understanding, and you can of course, okay, the cameras have meanwhile all turned off. Please turn your cameras on again. My understanding of the whole thing would be to look at tendencies, because there would be many moments in which the practice of digital humanities has started way before one officially started calling it digital humanities. And if we were to trace it from that back in history, 1949 could be one of the very first dates in which one could start talking about digital humanities. Now, what happened in 1949? There was this Italian Jesuit priest. His name was Father Roberto Buzza. I will write this name down if you are taking notes. Father Roberto Buzza was an Italian Jesuit priest who, for the first time, did something extremely important. He created an index verborum of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Are you writing it down? Or I'm just writing it down and then nobody's taking it from me? Yes or no? Are you taking it?
Yes, ma'am.
Krishnendu. সেটা খুলতে পারে. That's because it's being written as anybody can submit. Your answer has been submitted. What Father Roberto Buzza did is something extremely interesting. He created an index verborum Thomas Aquinas. But you will understand nothing if I said just this bit. What is an index verborum? Anybody has any clue? Is it a dictionary? Is it a thesaurus? What is it? Index, all of you know, index, the word index is Latin, but it has also come to English. It means a list of something, words or whatever. That's an index. Verborum obviously comes from the word, is a Latin for word. So index verborum is basically a list of words which have been already found from the works of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas is this famous Italian saint whose work Father Roberto Buzza wanted to structurally create in some kind of a digital index. Now, one way of doing it is to type down all the words and create a list of words that were ever uttered by Saint Thomas Aquinas. That's one way of doing it. But Father Roberto Buzza did not stop at that. Father Roberto Buzza started with the process of lemmatization of each word. Anybody in this class understands what lemmatization is? Because this is also a department of language and literature. What is lemmatization? Anybody has any clue? Anybody knows what is lemmatization? It's okay if you don't know, but then tell me no. It's interesting to find out more from each other. Lemmatization, more than being, how is a dictionary structured? What if I tell you what is a dictionary? What will you tell me? Just one of you give me a quick definition of a dictionary. Yes, anybody? What is a dictionary? Nobody in this class, just quickly give me a definition. I know all of you know the answer. You are just feeling shy or embarrassed to tell me? Don't feel shy. No answer is the wrong answer. What is a dictionary? Anybody, quickly. We just want to make the class interactive.
Word meaning.
Stock of words and meanings, correct. But how is the dictionary arranged? Any stock of word meaning? Can you get the word sacrifice before the word apple?
Alphabetically and serially.
Correct. So if you were to give an entire sentence of what is a dictionary, then the answer would be a dictionary is a compilation of words along with their meanings arranged alphabetically. So three things have to be there. The word itself has to be there. The meaning to the word has to be there, but the original word whose meaning I want to find out has to be arranged alphabetically. It just cannot exist randomly. What Father Roberto Buza did with the works of St. Thomas Aquinas is not just this. He did something more to it. The Index Verborum is more than a dictionary in the sense that, of course, the words and the meanings, whichever were written and uttered by St. Thomas Aquinas, is there. But he also arranged a lemmatization of these words. Then this question is, what is lemmatization? Lemmatization is grouping of words in certain structural groups, in certain structural categories. So, for instance, one of the commonest ways of doing lemmatization is by structuring prefix or is by structuring suffix. So now if I give you certain Bengali words, I'm just randomly saying you can also convert it to Assamese. I will ask one of you to convert it to Assamese also. Now say if I give you 5 words, korche, bolche, cholche, khache, gaiche. What are the 5 words? Anybody in this class understand Bangla at all? No, no? It's not important that you understand Bangla, but I'm trying to give you an idea. You can convert it to Assamese also. Let's say I'm talking to you about 5 words and I am structuring these 5 words, therefore lemmatizing these 5 words based on the suffix which is similar. So then I'm trying to talk about certain verbs which end in che. These are all activity words. Something is being done. Korche is to do, bolche is to say, khache is to eat, gaiche is to sing, douroche, jache, to go, to run. These are all verb words. So probably a way of lemmatizing would be to understand that any Bangla word which ends with the suffix che is a verb, is an activity word. If this is true, then this is one lemmatization category, because we are categorizing sets of words on the basis of a suffix. Or let's say the phrase pra, pratham, prabhat, prakriti. Now what is the meaning of the word pra? What is the meaning of the phrase pra? It means best. So whatever is pratham is something which happens in the first. It is a superlative. Whatever is prakriti is what happens in nature before every other thing. So because it's a prefix, the prefix pra will help us in lemmatizing another group of words. But there is a problem in it. It's easy to create a computer program, like we were also talking yesterday. It's easy to create a computer program and ask the computer program to structurally figure out every word that exists in any language which ends with che. For instance, Bangla. Or for instance, what will be the Assamese word for khache? Khache is eating. What is the Assamese word for khache?
Khaise.
Khaiche. So it's also che, right? What is the Assamese word for bolche? Bolche is to say.
Koise.
Koiche. So you see, even in Assamese, the suffix che is almost an activity word. It's a verb word. Koiche, khaiche, whatever. Now, one way of computing this lemmatization is by creating a search engine which will automatically find out every Assamese word which ends with che. Because then you will see that every Assamese word which ends with che is typically a verb which is an activity word. But in Bangla, there is another word, biche. Biche is a scorpion. I don't know what is the Assamese word for a scorpion? Kankra biche.
Bisa.
Bisa. It's close. But the problem, I'm sure such kinds of problems will also exist in Assamese language. It is on you to find out what these problems are. The point about having these classes is to figure out what kind of problems exist in your language and how to digitally approach, understand, and solve such problems. So one of such problems in Bangla is the problem with the lemmatization, that just a computer trying to figure out every kind of verb with the suffix che, if this were the computer program, then the computer program would end us telling that scorpion is a verb. Because in Bangla, the word for scorpion is biche. So then what do we do? If this is the problem arising in Bangla language, and many other such problems will also arise in Assamese language, I'm sure. How do you solve this then? Any idea? Let's take ideas from the students. How will you solve this problem? If the problem is that every word which ends with che is a verb, so you create a computer program in which you ask the search engine to figure out all the words which end in che. And you lemmatize the words and try and tell them that, okay, these are all verbs. And in between the word biche crops up, which is not a verb, it's a noun because it means a scorpion. How will you solve this problem? What is the extra thing you need to tell the computer program or the search engine? Is there something extra you need to do? Now think of yourselves as a programmer. How will you solve this problem? Please come up with responses. I want to see how your mind is working to the problem. Digital humanities is really to find out how to solve the problem. Can you create a computer program in the first place which will find out all the suffixes with che? Is it possible to create a computer program which will mine all kinds of data from words which end in che? First tell me that, yes or no. Is it possible to create this program?
Yes, ma'am.
Even I think it is possible. Even I think it is absolutely possible. Now with this program, this is a new problem which is coming, that lemmatization is not working because we are not being able to tell the computer that this word, however, should be an exception. Then what do we do? Yesterday we were discussing that the standard IQ of a computer is 0. The computer does not understand anything. The computer will think that biche is also a verb, but biche is not a verb. Then how will you solve this problem? Don't have to tell me in computer's language. You just tell me in normal logic. Is it that difficult a question? You know what happens? All of you are at master's level, is it? All of you are doing your master's, you're in MA level. Yes,
ma'am.
all students in this class is
Yes.
masters. If you were in class 1 and 2, you would have been able to tell this answer. This answer is so basic, you have to think either like a kid or like a computer. You cannot think like a highly educated student at your master's level. Quick, anybody from this class, what will you do? Either think like a kid or like a computer. Nobody wants to give this answer. How do you do with this random exceptions which do not fall into the lemmatized logic of words ending with che?
We can figure out it manually, ma'am.
Oh, correct. Oh, I so like Debashish. Debashish, can I quickly see you in the camera? Which is why I wanted to see you in your camera. Which is why I wanted to see everybody in the camera. Can I please see you?
Okay, ma'am.
all of you, if you can kindly turn your cameras on. Devashish, that is the correct answer. Which means that you cannot do humanities only through a computer. Which is the whole reason why digital humanities is not about artificial intelligence. Which is the whole point about why you cannot compute humanities the way in which you can compute a robot. Humanities studies involves language. Humanities studies involves culture. Humanities studies involves different other aspects of humanity in itself, which cannot necessarily be fixed in existing prototypal structures. And there are so many exceptions in the way a person speaks. There are so many exceptions in the way a person thinks. And there are so many exceptions in which a person acts, in which a person talks, in which a person feels. The way you feel love and the way I feel love might be different. If you fall in love for the first time, given your tender age, you probably will have a smile on your lips for the rest of the day, and your mom would be able to figure out something's terribly wrong with you. You must have fallen in love. Why else are you keeping on smiling for the whole day? But at my age, if I were to fall in love for the 20th time, for the 30th time, because I have already fallen in love once in my life with Tom Hanks, once in my life with Hrithik Roshan, and if I were to fall in love for the 30th time, I probably would behave in a way more mature manner and not keep smiling the way you would do given your tender years. We are human beings. We are not computers. We are not robots. Nothing works with us in standard typeset structures. There is always a limit of exception which will work in addition to the structural program of the computer. So what did Father Roberto Busa do when he was trying to figure out the lemmatization of the entire Index Verborum of St. Thomas Aquinas? Remember, this was in Latin. Latin is highly grammatical. More older the language would be more grammatical. There would be lesser flaws and lesser exceptions in Latin. There would be lesser flaws and lesser exceptions in Sanskrit. The more a language starts being spoken normally in the vernacular, more exceptions appear. But even in that, there obviously would be exceptions. How would Father Roberto Busa try and work around those exceptions? Devashish already gave the answer. Now I am asking for a time-specific answer. This is 1949. This is a work in the humanities. This is not a work in any computer science department of any Harvard University. A father is trying to organize all the writings of a certain St. Thomas Aquinas. He has already created a certain kind of computer program which will lemmatize and structuralize words. And now what did he do with the exceptions? This should be easy because Devashish already gave the correct answer. What did Father Roberto Busa do with all the exceptions?
Ma'am? Probably he manually figured out the exceptions because there cannot be mass exceptions.
Correct. Devashish is on fire. Even yesterday he was on fire. He is going to be one of the digital humanities practitioners in the next few years. I'm sure about it. Because there will not be too many exceptions, Father Roberto Busa sat through the next 13 years and created all the exceptions manually. For the next 13 years, which makes the date what? 1949 plus 13?
1962.
1962. By this time, there was an award that was declared internationally, which is called the Father Roberto Busa Award in Digital Humanities. Just think of the sheer amount of work that a person did. What he did was basically, what will you call it? Your generation, will you call it passion or will you call it madness? Or will you call it both?
Both, ma'am.
Correct.
Probably passion.
Because it's your generation and you already understand the importance of the work, you are at least willing to say both, tending towards passion. During his times, what did people think he did? It was madness. People thought that this father has gone completely mad. He is sitting with a strange work which has no value. Nobody will ever after read Saint Thomas Aquinas's works, and therefore this is a completely mad man. He is doing it out of his own sheer madness. It is true that people after Father Roberto Buza was not particularly interested in actually reading the works of Saint Thomas Aquinas. It is true. So if people thought that Father Roberto Buza was mad, what he did was sheer madness, because who will care to read about the entire corpus of works of Saint Thomas Aquinas? If people thought Father was mad, it might be true that Father was mad, because people did not read. Even today, how many of us read the Index Verborum of Saint Thomas Aquinas? But something extremely important happened along with the works of Saint Thomas Aquinas. The world came to understand that a methodology can exist if one wants to digitally lematize or structuralize works of the humanities. That possibility came up along with the madness of Father Roberto Buza. It does not matter if the work was based on the works of Saint Thomas Aquinas, or if it was based on the works of Homer, or if it was based on the works of Ovid, if it was based on the works of Kalidasa. It really does not matter what happened there. What mattered is, instead of the what mattered would actually be, we discussed this yesterday. What will become more important in digital humanities? Not the what, but the nobody. We discussed this yesterday. Yes, Devashish, you had been unmute. You wanted to give the answer, say. We discussed this yesterday. In digital humanities, the what is not important. More important is
How?
correct. Nayan is giving the correct answer. Why are you also scared to give the correct answer? You know, in your head, probably you are thinking every answer will be wrong. But surprisingly, every answer is actually right. Everything that all of you are saying is actually right. Just be courageous and bold enough to keep giving the correct answers. So what does actually Father Roberto Buza's enterprise tell us? Is it about how important the work of Saint Thomas Aquinas was? Is it really about Saint Thomas Aquinas? No. It is not important what Father Roberto Buza did. What is important is how Father Roberto Buza did it. How he approached a problem of the humanities and tried to solve it with solutions from digital tools, which is precisely what everybody will want to do in the digital humanities. This possibility opened up that you can create an entire corpus of humanities research and do it with a digital tool. In the year 1949, if it takes 10 years, in the year 2022, probably it will take 10 minutes. Because by now we have started having a fair bit of idea about how things can be done digitally, which can aid us in digital research. Any questions, comments? Everybody has understood? Yes, any questions, comments? Have you all understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Good, good. Finally, I hear a third voice other than Devashish and Noyon. This is Pranchi Bora. Pranchi, can you quickly tell us, can you quickly give a one-line summary of what you just learned in today's class so far? Why is the work of Father Roberto Buza important?
It was the first work,
First work of?
digital humanities.
Why do you call it digital humanities? That is more important. Okay, anybody else, particularly the ones who have not turned the cameras on? Is there two Debashish Buruguhai in this class?
No, ma'am. Actually, I am screen recording the thing in my laptop,
Okay.
and I cannot turn the microphone on in my laptop, so I'm
Okay.
using the mobile.
So this is also, trying to solve a humanities problem with the use of digital aid. Congratulations. Now, anybody wants to once again just quickly tell me in 1 or 2 lines why you will call Father Roberto Buza's work a work of digital humanities? Anybody? Okay, I will not force you if you do not want to speak, but I just hope everybody has understood, because I will quickly jump a few years. If we were doing this class over a month, I would have gone into very, very details. But since we are not doing it in that many details, we just have 1 hour to talk about it. I will jump quite a number of years and we'll move straight to what individually I personally think is the second most and perhaps the most important date in digital humanities. The first date will always be the most important date. In this case, it is 1949. I will now move to the second most important date, which in my analysis is the most important date, and that is 1983. Something terrific happens in 1983. I want to talk to you about two people, both of whom were doing significant contributions, not necessarily in humanities, but whose work would later on be taken by people studying digital humanities such as me. I will talk to you about two people, Richard Stallman and Jean-Francois Lyotard. Richard Stallman was a computer programmer who worked at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. Do you all know about MIT? What is the MIT?
Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Any famous professor's name you know who still teaches at MIT other than Richard Stallman? The more you try and correlate things with things, dates with dates, events with events, it becomes absolutely interesting and engaging for you to figure out how things work. Richard Stallman is, of course, a very important name, and I will tell you about Richard Stallman now. But any other name who's associated with the MIT, very famous name in the world, particularly important for people studying language and literature, not literature as much, but language, grammar. Have you all heard about Noam Chomsky?
Yes, ma'am.
Chomsky is still associated with the MIT. Good that this class is updated with great things in the world. There is the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, which is a very famous lab in the MIT. If any of you have friends or seniors or family relatives who ever worked in the MIT, talk to them, ask them about the Artificial Intelligence Lab. It's an experience of a lifetime to see the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. Till before, every software, even till today, every software has a certain thing called a source code. Source code is like the skeleton of the software, a certain code on which the entire software is built. And it is this source code which a coder writes. A coder is somebody who does coding, who writes codes. This by now many of you already know. We have heard so much about people who are doing coding as part of their jobs. We have heard so much about hackers who do independent coding. So by now all of you know what is a computer code? A computer code is a computer program, but an essential program, not an ancillary ornamental program, an essential program upon which a certain software functions. Even out of those codes, there is supposed to be a group of codes which is called the source code. It is like what a skeleton is to the human body. The source code is that set of basic computer codes upon which this entire software is standing. And this software source code is typically always closed. Only the owner has access to the source code. Have you all heard of the word backend? Backend of a computer, backend of a program? These words will become very important if you were trying to talk about, say, cybercrime. Somebody's video got leaked, but it was not an intentional video. Some MMS got leaked. Our generation grew up hearing those. Your generation probably has stopped hearing about MMS, but you can keep hearing about people's audio recordings getting leaked, people's inappropriate videos getting leaked. So then what do you do if your video gets leaked? Your video got leaked and your video went viral. These words all of you are aware of? Viral. It is your generation which talks about internet content getting viral. So supposing an inappropriate audio or an inappropriate video gets leaked and therefore it gets viral, it gets unintentionally viral. It's not the kind of viral that you want it to be. What do? How do you approach the problem? What will you immediately do if an inappropriate audio or video content gets uploaded on the internet and then it goes viral? What will you think of doing? This is
we can
say.
We can report it to the cybercrime police.
Absolutely. We have to immediately report it to the police. We have to file an FIR, and the police will deal with it under the cybercrime cell. Now, what will the cybercrime cell do? Why are we constantly telling each other that go to the cybercrime cell, go to the cybercrime cell? What will the cybercrime cell do?
They can trace the actual culprit behind it. Probably.
How will they trace the actual culprit behind it? What answers we are giving are theoretical answers. I want to get to the technical answer. Supposing I am a police person who sits in the cybercrime cell, how will I know how the original video has been uploaded and by whom and where? What will I do then? I will obviously try and locate something called the IP, Internet Protocol. What is the IP? Has anybody heard of the IP before, Internet Protocol?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the Internet Protocol?
Some sort of address in internet.
Correct. Manually, if I were to locate a culprit, if I were to locate a murderer, I will naturally first try and go to the person's address, talk to the mother or father of the criminal who has committed a murder. Now the father will tell me that for the last 3 days, the person was not here. So then I will try and locate whether the person had a girlfriend or a boyfriend. So then I will try and talk to that person. Then that person will tell me he was last found in the university or in his workspace. There are ways of locating. Even in internet traffic, there are ways of locating through IPs. And this source code, why will the police be able to access it? Why can I not access it? Why can Debashish not access it? Why can Nayan not access it? Why will the police only be able to figure out the correct IP and therefore try and delete the original video from the original content? Because if you delete it from the source address, it will get removed everywhere else. Why will the police only be able to do it? And not say Dikshita Datta, not say Nishamoni Mahanta. Why will the police be able to do it and not them? Now, Dikshita, you can turn your camera on. It's okay. You can giggle in front of me. That is because legally, the backend is closed for the mass. The source program cannot be accessed from the mass, by the mass. Can you understand the level of problem, the level of chaos that will start existing in a society if the source code was open? Anybody could do any nonsense in any website, in any software by uploading inappropriate content in the source code. But because the police has, other kinds of powers, a bit of legal and a bit of executive powers, the police can specially have the permission to access the source code. the police can remove content from backend, which essentially tells us that source code in any software is blocked. It is closed. But in the year 1983, this software activist, Richard Stallman, I am hoping you are taking down the names, at least whatever I have written in the chats. You can read them up later on. Richard Stallman, for the first time, created a certain kind of a computer compiler, which was called Unix. Have you heard about Unix before? Unix is a precursor to what today is Linux. Many people, I'm sure, has heard about Linux. But before Linux, what was originally created is a kind of a compiler called Unix. Unix, which later on gave birth to Linux. In Unix kind of program compiling, Richard Stallman principally kept the source code open. He did not create a closed source code. Please understand what I'm trying to say. First, understand the statement, then we will understand the implications. It's very important. First, one needs to understand the statement in itself. In 1983, Richard Stallman created a certain kind of a computer compiler, which is called Unix, which is a precursor to Linux. And he called it GNU. We will get to the details later. In which he kept the source code open. Now, what does it mean to keep the source code of a software open? Any guesses? Are you all liking what I'm saying? Are you finding it interesting? Because this is not really relevant to your everyday curriculum. This is something beyond. Are you finding any interest in whatever is being said?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it all very new? You probably have never heard it before now, right? Very new.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is the implication if the source code of a software is open? What will happen if the source code of a software is open? In that particular software, anybody will be able to add content, modify content, and even remove content. Things which earlier could be done, but could be done only from the back end, will now also be done from the front end. So anybody can have access to the content. There will be no difference between the front end computer and the back end of a computer. Every user will have access to the front end as much as every user will have access to content from the back end. What does that mean? Do you know of any examples in which anybody can edit any content? Can you think of any example?
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia, absolutely. Wikipedia is one of the primary examples of an open editor called the wiki. Wiki in itself is an editor. It's called pedia because it has direct reference to to encyclopedia, because it writes a whole lot of things about a whole lot of things. It's encyclopedic in nature, therefore the suffix has been created as pedia. But the point is, it is based on a software editor called the wiki. What is the kind of editor?
It is open for all.
Correct. And this kind of editor, in short, is called Wysiwyg. Any clue what is Wysiwyg? It's an acronym. Any clue what it could mean? What is the full form of Wysiwyg? I have already written it in the chat now. Would anybody read it aloud?
What you see is what you get.
So you have complete access over a Wysiwyg editor such as Wiki. If one were to ask you what kind of an editor is Wiki, Wiki is a Wysiwyg editor. What is a Wysiwyg editor? A Wysiwyg editor is an open source editor. Have you all heard of this phrase before? Open source. It's one of the primary things one needs to keep in mind if you were doing digital humanities. For the rest of your life, you will spend studying open source, open source. Linux is open source software. Have you all heard of this kind of statements? Anybody in your laptop uses Linux instead of Windows? Anybody in this class uses laptop and your operating system is not Windows, it is Linux?
Yes, ma'am. Earlier I have worked in Linux.
Correct, correct. Those of you who have already worked in Linux will know, unlike Windows, you need not install any antivirus in Linux. Why? Because if everything is open, what will you steal? The question of stealing gets removed from open source. Open source opens a completely new philosophical debate between stealing and sharing. Open source tries to tell you that if content were limited to a certain access writable generation, to a certain access writable category of people, if you were to limit content to, supposing I have a very funny joke. When we were young, these types of things would happen. Somebody knows a funny joke, but that student will not tell the joke to everybody in the class. That student will tell the joke only to his or her best friends. How would the others feel? They would feel left out. If somebody got extremely good lunch for tiffin, he or she would not share it with everybody in the class. He or she would share it only with his closest circle. How would the others feel? Others would feel left out. Richard Stallman philosophically started making a statement that the moment your softwares are closed, stealing from softwares will happen. Make it open so that everybody can easily access it. If there is no gate, then there is no question of gate crashing. If there is no law of not to enter, then there is no breach of law of trespassing. This software generation, this software philosophy started by Richard Stallman talks about trusting people in the internet by keeping the source code open. Richard Stallman believes because we do not trust people, because we constantly want to create a hierarchy, because we constantly want to believe that this person is above this person and that person is below this person, this hierarchy creates an internet-based commotion. Everybody should be let to do everything on the internet with their proper identity. Then people will also understand that Nayan did that chaos. Then go and give Nayan a piece of your mind. But crime starts happening, trolls start happening, internet impersonation starts happening because a certain class of people is made to feel left out from the whole scheme of internet things. Are you understanding what I'm saying? There are major debates whether this can be accepted or this cannot be accepted. There are major debates on whether open source works or open source doesn't work. There are major debates on whether people can be universally trusted in the internet or people should not be universally trusted and there should be some moderation. But this in itself is a major step in the history of digital humanities, because from now on, anybody can write, anybody can draw, produce art, anybody can access music. Think of YouTube. Earlier, only if you had money and if you could buy a cassette or a CD or a DVD, you had access to some kind of music. Today, everybody has access to all kinds of music. Also for free, you don't even have to pay. Think of Facebook. The world can literally get connected to each other. Earlier, we used to think, Acha, that relative, my uncle stays in the US. So if I have to make an ISD call to my uncle in the US, I need to talk for 3 minutes because my 3-minute talking budget is this much. I cannot talk beyond 3 minutes. I don't know if your generation has even witnessed this. It was our generation. If we called people abroad, we used to time our talks. Today, would anybody think about it? It's free. It's up there. Whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, these are other debates, secondary debates. The first point which one has to understand and acknowledge is the fact that this has happened. Open source has happened in the scheme of the digital world. And that has introduced a wide range of possibilities which would not exist had the Internet of Things not schemed it like in this way. If the Internet of Things was any way different, people would not have universal access to each other. We will have a class on debates in digital humanities in which we will take up whether we will talk about tendencies, whether we will talk about institutional debates. We will have debates on whether we really want to continue open source without moderation, or we want to continue open source with moderation, or we do not want open source at all. But these are secondary debates. Now, historically, one has to understand and acknowledge that this has happened. We have 5 minutes left for the class. If you have any questions, doubts, comments. Because I am so passionate, I keep speaking about it. Sometimes I don't know if you want to ask questions. Anybody, any questions, comments?
Ma'am, I have a doubt about Linux. You have said that it is open source operating system based on open source operating system. Then we cannot use all applications on Linux. That is my only, experience with Linux.
That is another problem. So probably a program which has been created by the Windows, and that in itself is closed. They will make it so closed that you cannot operate it elsewhere because money is involved, business is involved. The business category along with software is a major issue, is a major debate one has to address. We will talk. In fact, in my PhD thesis, I spoke pages and pages about it. How in the name of freedom and in the name of proprietorship, we're actually monopolizing a certain internet practice. That's another debate. What you have pointed out is correct. If you're trying to use applications from closed platforms, they will probably not work in open platforms. We could dream of a world where everything is open. The operating system is open, the applications are open. And that kind of a world actually exists. Instead of using Google as a search engine, if you use DuckDuckGo. Has anybody heard of DuckDuckGo?
Yes, ma'am.
If you could use DuckDuckGo, you'll easily operate in your Linux. The world exists. Whether we can use it effectively in our day-to-day life, particularly in India, in your case, particularly in Tejpur, these are other debates. There is a question of possibility and there is a question of practicability. It is possible. I don't. Any other questions, comments?
Ma'am,
Yes, who's asking? Nayan, yes, please.
ma'am, you told us about GNU. Ma'am, what is GNU?
GNU is a self-referential acronym, which means GNU. So we know that N is not and U is Unix, but what is G? Richard Stallman intentionally did it to give us a feel of how it would feel if you don't open everything, if you keep something closed. So the full form of GNU is not Unix, but nobody knows what G is. It's a trick. It's a trick. It's a funny trick which Richard Stallman played in order to make people understand, look, this is how you will feel if everything is not told to you. If you hide some, say something. That's an interesting question, Nayan. Okay, if we have no other questions, then is Dr. Neog around?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Over to you then.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yes,
Mitra,
sir. Over to you then.
for this great session. I think we will meet you tomorrow at 4 to 5 p.m.
Yes, between 4 to 5 p.m.
between 4 to 5 p.m. Okay, then we will meet you tomorrow. Okay, আৰু আমাৰ ষ্টুডেন্ট খিনিক
Thank
কৈছো
you.
যে
Thank you,
কাইলৈ
sir.
হয় কাইলৈ আমি ক্লাছ বাইদেউ মেমে কৰিব কাইলৈ 4টা বজাৰ পৰা 5টা বজালৈকে একেটা লিংকতে থাকিব তোমালোক সকলো উপস্থিত থাকিবা মই ফাৰ্ষ্ট চেমৰ ষ্টুডেন্ট খিনিকো কৈছো তোমালোকো থাকিবা আৰু যদি কিবা তোমালোকৰ আজি লেকচাৰটো আকৌ শুনিবা তোমালোকে যদি কিবা থাকে কালিলৈ আকৌ সুধিব পাৰিবা Thank you so much. Okay.